Humans of Earth, welcome to AI Snap That. My name is Michael Rollins, and I'm joined as always by my co-host, Thanos, he of the Snapdom. And today we are bringing you the exciting news that Agile is dead. It is so dead that we need to bury it and move on and acknowledge that our robotic overlords have fully updated the stupid methodology to begin with. Thanos, how are you?
Are the cops going to knock on your door and say we've been looking for this agile thing? And do you know
God.
anything about it? Do you have anything to do with it?
Dude,
Did you kill agile?
yeah, I drove a stake through its heart recently.
I talk about agile with a small a and agile with a capital A. And I think there's things to learn from agile with a capital A and things to practice from agile with a small a. I mean, we can get our definitions straight here.
In general, why don't you tell me what your definitions are? Because I'm actually curious to hear your take on it. And I know that in some ways we're in agreement. But by the way, ladies and gentlemen, there is a story that backs all this up. We'll get there.
There's no agreement whatsoever. We'll see what we get to. For me, agile with a capital A is the agile from 20 years ago that was probably meant to be as an agile with a small a, but it ended up being an agile with a capital A, where you can go get Scrum Master certifications and things of that nature.
Yes.
Where you have to follow specific procedures and do dances in a very specific way, otherwise, like, you get yelled at. I don't think that was the original idea behind agile, but I think that's kind of the agile that we have and the agile that a lot of people practice. And yeah, that thing couldn't die soon enough, but I don't think we're going to see that die anytime.
What about small a agile?
Small A Agile is, if you look at the original Agile manifesto and you squint, actually, you don't need to squint really that much, but if you read it, it's a little bit sort of like the Bible. You can interpret it in any number of ways. And you can end up with capital A Agile, or you can end up with something reasonable. And I think there's a lot of ways to interpret this as something reasonable. You okay, Michael?
I'm good. I'm good. I just please keep going. There's quality in this.
So
Please keep
there's
going.
ways to interpret this as a system of thinking and a set of principles that will generate frameworks and methodologies that work and that are adaptable and they're not set in stone. And there's ways to interpret this to end up with something that misses the point of why we're doing this and ends up with just a set of ceremonies that don't actually serve a reasonable.
When you talk about this thing that needs a lot of ceremonies and stands on a lot of dogma, and then you talk about it being like the Bible, I like the analogy is perfect. It is truly perfect. Because Big A Agile, it sounds like a religion. I mean, for work,
Very much so. By the way, have you seen this postcard that has a Jesus talking to Moses and sorry, it has God talking to Moses and God is saying, actually, this is set in stone.
Yeah, I've not seen that. And I don't, by the way, if you are at all interested in any of that kind of thing, there's a podcast called Data Over Dogma. And it is phenomenal because it basically takes the data and compares it to the dogma of a lot of these religions, which is not like what we're going to do today with Agile, capital A, little a. Okay. So all right. So first off, I know the entire audience will be shocked, all three of them. I despise ceremony. I despise dogmatic approaches to things. I despise things that are inflexible. As a matter of fact, somebody said SOC 2 to me recently, and I had a physical revolting, it's like, oh, God, no. Process for process drives me insane. And I have never truly worked in an organization that did Big A Agile. And I think the entire concept of things like Scrum Masters and whatnot is just absurd, right? Like, why do we need one person to defend the engineers from interacting with the rest of the company?
Because they went to a 4-day seminar, Michael, so they know what they're doing.
Yeah, I'm sorry. If you list Scrum Masters your primary skill set, no, we're done. Like, I have nothing to do with you. Now, there are definitely things from little a Agile. Obviously, that through my whole career, we're going to do sprints, we're going to do tickets, and some folks deal with much more process than others. I have always leaned towards as little process as possible, but it has actually been my as I've done most of this, my realization has been that most of the agile processes are not for the engineers at all, right? Engineers are,
Tell me more.
it's, you want me to build a feature? Okay, I'm gonna go build a feature. But what these processes are really for is visibility, right? Is
You mentioned it's not for the engineer, but I think one of the original features of Agile was for the engineer. It was the we will define a sprint, and then we will go sprint for this sprint, and you will not interrupt me with something else because you change your mind. So the role of it was to protect the
yes.
again beyond this, or we understandings. But I think there were features in the system that were meant for the engineer. Now you go to places with Big A Agile, and when someone comes up with a sprint, the engineer points to the Bible of Scrum and says, "No, you cannot change this thing mid-sprint and not do anything about it until next Monday." That's being stupid, not doing Agile with a small a.
Yeah.
We can have some understandings of what's going to happen, decide to take this modification, and we can have a reasonable discussion about it. That's small a agile. Refusal to do anything about it until you rip the sprint apart and start over is big A agile.
And it's worth noting that like Agile in general, the Agile Manifesto was a response to Waterfall, right? It's that we're gonna do all this planning up front, and then we're just gonna build the whole freaking thing. Don't talk to us for 3 months.
For years.
Yeah, or years. Yeah. And I've only ever seen one organization that maybe was able to pull it off. Normally, if
It's
you
one more than I did.
if you and I may have differing opinions on that particular organization, actually. The rumors from the inside were great. Rumors from the outside were terrible. But long story short is most of the time, if you call yourself agile, there is a whole lot of, is this agile or is this kind of just waterfall? And we're just calling it agile.
Well, is agile the way that it happened 20 years ago,
That's the point.
making the waterfall a lot smaller? So we have a sequence of really small waterfalls, which was better than having one really big
One
waterfall,
really
but
big
maybe
one.
we
Yeah.
can do better than that now. Since this is a podcast about AI, I want to take and get your take on this. Do you think we could create a product that is your AI Scrum Master, so we get rid of the human and then just have a chat tell you what to do every day? What do you think? Would you buy that?
I don't want a robot planning out my day. Like I don't
Uh-oh.
want this. I actually have Morgan, it's actually a really cool like calendar task system that I have used recently because I have like too many calendars across multiple platforms. And it has this like this spiffy feature where you can like line up all these tasks and tell the how many hours is this thing going to take, and then you can just click a button and it'll schedule them for you. And I like immediately had, I'm turning this shit off because I don't know, like, you don't, this is not how it works. The thing is
Michael, I
though,
really thought this idea had legs.
what,
The AI-based Scrum Master.
I mean, okay, hold on, I want to go back to something. Status. In general, most engineers can manage their own freaking time. Okay. And most engineers know how to take a large thing and decompose it into a bunch of small things that they can then show progress on. And it's not like, it's literally a core skill, right? It is troubleshooting, is what it is. We just troubleshoot the feature. We figure out which things need to be built first. But Agile, all the sprints, all the boards, all this other stuff is for the people above, right? Because the manager or the PM is going to get asked by their boss, how long is it going to take? And the PM or the manager is going to be like, the board says this. And then
What does an agile board say as to how long something's going to take? Is there on that?
people pretend it does, right? It's like, we're going to, okay, we have 5 sprints to do this. And is there any
And
any,
how exactly do they know how that's going to
they don't,
be?
they don't. But here's the thing. In a much larger organization, there's very little visibility into what's actually happening on the ground. And so a lot of the agile systems have been repurposed to help provide that visibility to the people above. You disagree on this one?
No, I agree. That's a kind of twisting the system to do something it was never intended to
Yes,
do, and
that's
it's
the
really never
point.
going to work. But
That's the point. Is, hey, we originally were going to use this so that we could break things down into tiny pieces of work that allowed us to move through things much faster and be able to release more often. But it has become a process by which we actually slow the entire engineering process down because we have to be able to communicate upwards. And
This is a drum that I've been trying to bang for the longest time, but a lot of organizations reach for planning and predictability in lieu of the ability to execute. You cannot have planning and predictability until you can execute. So you tell me like, what am I going to do in 6 months? And it's like, you don't know how
you know
much
what you're
stuff
gonna
you
do
can
next
fit in
week?
like one sprint.
Yeah,
Like you can't
for
figure out
next
one
week.
sprint. How are you going to stick together 26 of these and come up with some kind of planning? So first go sort out your execution pipeline and make sure you can shoot sprints or camo, whatever you do. Can you do week consistently like a
Yeah,
few times?
yeah. Can you
And
hit
then
the
we can talk
numbers?
about planning and predictability.
Hmm.
But I think that's a natural inclination, right? Because what happens is you have a team and they they're given a project, right? The big boss comes in and says, "I want you to build me this,"
Yeah.
and they're like, "Yeah, all right, it's gonna take a month." So the boss comes, leaves them alone for a month. Mistake number one, and comes back after a month. And by the way, Scrum tried to fix that because it tried to put the product owner kind of in that meeting day to day and keep tabs on that.
Yes.
But that got twisted for a different purpose a week later.
Yeah.
Um, the boss comes back after a month and goes, "No, this is not what I asked for. Maybe you should have stuck around and look in this day to day." So they go around next time, spend another couple of weeks to clean it up, and then the pattern repeats itself until eventually 3 months later we get to something. So what did the boss learn from this? And say, "Oh, I need to write tighter specs." So next time I write tighter specs, then they will break it down the same way, and then we'll know exactly how long it's going to take because the specs are going to be really precise. And that is like completely the wrong approach because we,
That's
we don't
Waterfall.
acknowledge that we it's not just waterfall, but it's not acknowledging that we don't know what we don't know.
Yeah.
Like, there's no
Yeah.
way you can go and brain dump a spec, take 3 months of development, and be correct in any level of fidelity. We solved this. Agile had this solved, right? It was people over process, which is make a small team that has all the capabilities to solve this problem, put them in a room, lock them in if you want, until they come out with a solution.
Right.
But now you have all the expertises in one place. You can make all the decisions. You can get all the feedback. You have these rapid feedback loops. So when the boss sees it and that's not what I wanted to. Now, if the boss doesn't want to be in that room for a month, then they got to make someone like a product owner that will be in that room for a month
They
because
have
that's
to
the
have a
only way you can
babysitter.
solve that problem. Yeah.
Yeah.
But if you let a team go to build something completely bespoke with no feedback for a month, well, good luck. You get what you deserve.
Yeah. And as
Was this a
no, but it was a good one. I mean, look, I have fallen prey to, hey, I need you to go do this. Can you do it in 3 weeks? Okay, great. And then 2.5 months later, it's what's happening. And when it happens, there was trust, and now there's not trust. And when there's not trust, like that's not good. And as the boss, as the guy, I probably should have like literally been checking in, but I'm like, I don't want to breathe down people's necks. And so it is tempting just to say, go do this, and then be like, hey, what's my status? And the problem is that the status is often given in a morning meeting where the engineer just tries to reframe the thing they said yesterday.
status is a trying to report back on a bad set of assumptions of how long things are going to
Right.
take. By the way, have you seen the Lunar Logic Scrum planning cards?
Mm-mm.
Someone had made at some point in time some kind of like Scrum planning cards where you get cards and they have numbers on them and you can go Fibonacci or like exponential or whatever for how long things you can take, right? Small, medium, large. Do your
Sure.
sizing for your sprint. So Lunar Logic has made these set of cards that this and the size is one, too fucking big, no fucking clue.
Yeah.
So the three things you can either
Yeah.
break it down to one or just accept that we don't really have a clue and we got to go build something and do this. So if you start with the assumption that this is as good as I'm going to get to estimation, you can change your process to something that still gets reasonable results. Because it's not reasonable, just to be clear, since I'm coming across saying you're never going to know. It is not. It is reasonable for someone to ask and say how long it's going to take, and you should eventually be able to give an answer to these sort of things. But you can't do it before you have the ability to execute. And when you want to do this, you have to do it kind of in a structured kind of way. Like you cannot say I'm going to take forever. I don't know how I'm going to take. But what you can say is I can build a really good system where I can execute quickly. So you give me one thing and I can build this in days or weeks, but not months or years. You can repeat and repeat. And I think when you build that sort of trust between the business side and the engineering side,
Yes.
it works a lot better because even though I can't see what you're going to have for me in 6 months, I know that it feels really good to be able to try ideas and iterate on them and see how you're building your speed to do that.
Yes, and there's an interesting effect on from the ceremonies, right? Like these stand-ups. I have for the majority of my career, when I find myself in stand-ups, I'm like, this is the stupidest fucking thing we could do. because everybody gets in, they try to, I told you I did this yesterday and I made progress. And now I'm going to change the order of my words to tell you that I'm going to do the exact same thing today. And the worst part is that everybody's, oh, we're going to stand around a table and we're just going to say what we're going to do. Then we're going to go sit down. So number one, that never happens. Number two, everybody checks out. So it's my turn? Yeah, so I did the thing. Let me hold on. What did I do yesterday? Okay, yeah, I was doing the thing and I got it to testing and it turns out it just really didn't work very well. So I'm going to actually pull that back and continue to work on it. And then you check right out again. That's what everybody does. And we pretend like we don't do it, right? Maybe the manager is listening and now it's a status meeting. It is not, there's no useful meeting here for the engineers. And the process, the ceremony drags engineering to a crawl. And it breeds, and here's the crazy thing, is it will breed engineers that cannot think for themselves. It will squish and squeeze the autonomy out of an engineer. It's wild. I've seen it happen. And you're
Like
like,
the ticket machine, right? Give me a ticket and I'll come talk to you
yes,
about Scrum tomorrow, and then you give me another ticket, and like I just tickets come in this way and tickets go out that way, and
it,
that's my job.
and what's worse is once you have this engineer that's been converted into a ticket machine, if it's not in the ticket, it's not going to get built.
Oh yeah.
And they're like, oh, where are my requirements? You told me that you needed this big thing over here, but you didn't write every single freaking detail down. And so I'm unable to execute. I'm so sorry.
Yeah.
So
Well, you want me to talk to other people? This has to come in
yeah.
like a spec.
Oh, but why can't I expect you to have context on the entire like thing you're building so that you can make good?
And it's your fault. You're being lazy for not writing the specs down.
Yes.
That's really the problem here.
Yeah. And so
Not my fault.
you end up wasting the most valuable people's time because they're not ticket machines. They understand why things are happening and they end up having to write the freaking ticket so that the ticket machine can cha-ching.
How's AI going to solve all of this?
There's interesting. I found myself in a situation recently and through a lot of different circumstances. First off, we brought a product to alpha in 4 weeks. And it's one of the really interesting things is that like it was usable and it is usable. And as soon as we got it to alpha, like I knew rolling this thing out, there's already major things we got to fix, but it worked. Okay. And it did what it needed to do to show what it really would do. And in only 4 weeks, and and we talked about it, it's a multi-agent system with all kinds of different data inputs. And now here's the crazy thing. I wrote most of the code on the alpha push, but there was a point at which I needed extra help. And because of some interesting situations that cropped up, the only person I could rely on was the intern.
You're talking about an actual intern, not an AI intern.
No, like an actual intern. Okay. And I went to the intern and I said, friend, I desperately need your help. And there's truly no one else to help right now. And I've got these tasks over here and I need you to start executing on them. And we hadn't let the intern use Claude Code yet. And I finally said, here's the keys to Claude Code. This is what's going to happen. And so I laid out the first kind of big task. And I said, I need you to do this. I don't expect it to be perfect. I am here to help you if you get stuck. And the look of fear, just abject terror in this guy's eyes. I mean, I was looking at him and talking to him, and I could just see
He's like, I'm the intern here, right?
Yes, the panic. Yes, that's exactly what the list like.
Like, I can get you some coffee.
What do you mean you're going to rely on me to help build login? What am I going to do? And I just looked at him and I was like, I see the panic, and that's good. That's good. And I just want to let you know, if you fuck this up, I can help you put it back together. I will unfuck it for you. Okay. And so he goes out and he comes back a day later and he's like, I think it works. So we go and we pull the branch and we look at it, and sure enough, login worked. And there were things, right? There were things. There's always things. So I handed him the next task. And this time it wasn't abject terror. It was fear. And I said, all right, I need you to go do this. And it was something different. And then it took them less than a day. And I look and we go through the code. And I'm like, this works. It's not gorgeous. It's not pretty. There's definitely some rough edges in here, but like it works. So I was like, here's the next task. Now he's only anxious.
It wasn't like fix the rough edges. It's like, yeah, just move on.
I mean, this, yeah, he came up, we looked at it, and I was like, I need you to do this and fix
Okay,
this.
you did fix the rough edges.
Yeah, there were some fixes, right? But we were allowing rough edges to get to alpha. And then by the time he came back the fourth time, I realized there was a problem because he did the third task in 2 hours. And when he came back the fourth time, boy, he was ready. There was no fear. There was no anxiety. This man had found freedom and he was going to run. And so I handed him, I just kept feeding him tasks. And these weren't tickets. These were, we have this idea. It's supposed to work this way. Go make it happen. Right? And he would go make it happen. At one point, he comes back and I said, hey, I want you to actually, because we're building this with AI, man. There was one point I opened up a freaking UI file. I had no idea what it was written in. Not a damn clue. I like sat there and I looked at it.
What was your JS, baby?
I was like, oh God, what have I done? It was like, this looks like HTML. It's like, we were using React, but I'd actually never specified the library. It turns out it was Tailwind. And I knew that we would need to eventually get to Tailwind. And so I told the intern, I was like, hey, we're going to need to get to Tailwind at some point. And there were some pretty specific reasons for it, but I'd never seen it. And part of it was in Tailwind and part of it was in a few different things, right? When I say there's rough edges, I'm like, we had multiple paradigms running around at certain points. And so I said, I want you to go look at this and just see what it's going to take to get to Tailwind. So this was in the afternoon, and I'm actually in the office with him. It's great. He comes back the next morning. He comes up to me about 2 hours in. He's like, all right, I refactored the entire front end in Tailwind. And I was like, whoa, time out, brother. What did you just say? It's like, he goes,
checked it in, and it's in production.
It wasn't quite, no, but I mean, it wasn't in production yet, but it didn't take too long to get to production. And I was like, I need you to go test everything. Like literally go click all the buttons, do all the things. Let's push this to a staging environment. Let's have other people and it worked. And like, now I'm in this position where come to find out, he's actually like thriving. I had to pull him aside. I was like, I'm so sorry I did this to you. I said, if you ever go to a normal software engineering job, you are going to be bored out of your freaking mind. I was like, this is not how it works. Nobody operates this way. Like, we are moving at such an incredible pace. Most engineering teams would be freaking out. In point of fact, part of the engineering team was freaking out. And, you know, so when you look at the code commits for our alpha, it's me and it's him. And then there's
So I think that's where you can get the productivity benefits when the bottleneck is actually in the speed of typing the code. And that is one person, that is two people. I think once you're more than that, then that kind of begins to go away really quickly because there's other activities you have to do.
All right. And that is my takeaway. That's actually my takeaway from this is that when you start talking about all this process, when you talk about Agile, when you have all these tickets, you end up with large teams. You end up with multiple teams. And the more people you add, the slower things get.
Well, if you do it poorly,
if you do it poorly, I'm sure that
the slower you get, right? There are techniques known to us of how to scale this to teams. Now, it's not going to be necessarily a linear scaling.
Right.
That's the best you can expect and hope for if you do everything perfectly right. Actually, maybe you could do even better than that, but it's tough, right? Because it is every time you add, there's more communication overhead, there's more paths that this can go wrong, there's more things that are needed to do. So you need to structure your teams and your architecture in just the right way to be able to do these things. And architecture I don't know, it's a fun argument. Are teams easier to change or is architecture easier to change? Because they kind of eventually change together, a la Conway. Because you can wave your wand and move a bunch of people around, and now you have different teams. Now, I'll argue that's not necessarily immediately going to work.
Yeah.
You can't do that too frequently. And architecture is kind of, in some ways, I guess, just code. We can do whatever we want with it. But if you don't have the
It-
right kind of tests and things, code can also be hard to change.
so there was a moment shortly after we got this thing to alpha, and we have this pipeline, this machine learning pipeline that was being worked on. It wasn't really moving, and I had to take it over. And I pulled this thing to my local, and very first question was like, hey, are you guys even testing this locally? The answer was, we can't test this locally. And then I'm looking at PRs and looking at, I mean, just one line change, push, one line change, push. It was awful. So the very first thing I did was like, hey, how do I test this locally? This is insane. Anyways, I ended up going through and I rewrote the entire freaking thing in the weekend. And it worked. It had never actually deployed prior to this, despite
You could
having
test it locally, hopefully.
and I could test individual pieces locally. It was difficult to test it. It's a pipeline for data science, machine learning, and
Yeah, I
so
mean, if you test each of the
I
chunks,
could
then
test
you have
these
some
to the
hope that when you put them
chunks. Yeah,
together, that
it's
something happens. But if you
like
can't even test the chunks, it's
yeah,
like,
yeah, and
when,
I went with the architecture they laid down. If redoing it, I would probably do it a little differently. But here's the thing: the PR, the whole adage, if you submit a one-line PR, you're gonna get 20 comments on why it's not good. But if you submit a 20,000 line PR,
looks good to
nobody
me.
looks good to me, baby. There ain't nobody gonna read that. And as I'm like working, as we've been working through these alphas, and after the alpha, as we just threw away the entire LLM core and have rebuilt it. I'm starting to realize that. So there's 3 engineers now on the team. It's myself and 2 new grads. One of them's a like true intern, no experience. The other one just got out of Virginia Tech with a master's degree. And the new grad, the true new grad, is like fearless. And I've told him, I'm like, if you fuck it up, we will unfuck it. Like I want you fearless. I want you running. If it goes to production and everything blows up, like we'll make it happen. We'll fix it. Please try not to drop the production database. Like that is my.
But you were going to say that it's impossible to push it to production and break everything because we have all the right checks in all the right places. It makes it really
I'll,
safe to write code with AI.
and I will get there. Yes. And as I'm like, so I take this giant project, I decompose everything, rebuild it. PR's huge. Our intern literally was turning tickets around faster than I could even come up with them. Right. And the sheer amount of code that I was outputting on both projects and that he was outputting, there's no way a human could keep up with it. The AI is generating code faster than anybody can read it. And okay, all right, I see it. I see the look on your face. All right, but let me give you 2 learnings out of this. Number one, code is now disposable. Okay.
If you have the right tests outside your black box to replace that code with a different black box that does the same thing, sure. But
Number two is that robots have to automate all the review. They have to automate all the testing, and they need to surface major issues when they pop up. And
yes, and yes, but you still have to do the final checks.
you do. I mean, it's not, you don't ever want to ship. We haven't touched it. We haven't looked at it. We haven't tested it and just go ahead and hit the deploy button. I mean, that's stupidity. But
Okay, I'll take it back. You have to do the final checks, but I haven't seen a way where you can get to the final checks without constant steering.
so let me tell you what I set up today. And there's a process that's starting to form, and I'm really intrigued by it. So right now, whenever you submit a PR to our repositories, it immediately spins up a Claude PR review with Opus. And Thanos, it is giving some of the most incredible reviews I've ever seen. And the first time I even used the freaking thing, it's, hey, you got these 2 critical security issues right here. The reason these are critical security issues is that you're allowing yourself a possible injection attack by the way that you're reading this variable inside of this particular thing. And it's, oh, okay. And another one was it's identified a few possible race conditions. I don't know if they're truly race conditions, but it like flagged those as yellow. It's like, you may want to take a look at this. And so the review that's coming out of it is awesome. And then I have the robot on my machine. So I tell the robot on my machine, go get the review. Let's work through it. And now I'm watching the code, right? At this point, when I'm doing all this, it's not YOLO mode, right? And I'm looking at the code and perhaps stopping and testing the execution and things like that. And but I'm now managing two robots to do this, right? And it's, oh my God. I mean, yes, I need my eyes in here, but I am now so much faster, and this robot can review all this code in the amount of time a human never could.
I'm aligned with that way of working, but it's kind of a manager of a really fast and smart typist.
Yes, yeah.
It has a fair amount of knowledge in software. Again, we've discussed this before. It's like the smartest, stupidest PhD intern, right? Because they will make some mistakes a human would never make. They can also do some things a human could never do because they can
Oh
do so
yeah.
much more the brains can in their head. So you have to have the right ways to suss those out. Because like I know like it has snuck errors under my nose before, right? So part of the gig is figuring out what are things that I am susceptible to falling prey to so that I can then scrutinize those a little further sometime later.
Oh, believe me, the knowledge cutoff is brutal. The funny thing is the first thing it reviewed was the GitHub action that was going to invoke it, right? So it's like it's invoking itself. It's like I push it, I set the PR, the GitHub action is there, everything's set up, so it reviews itself, and it's like Claude 4.1 Opus doesn't exist. You need to use Claude 3.5 Sonnet. It's no,
Come on.
no, this isn't good. So definitely, this is not unsupervised, and the knowledge cutoff is actually going to be ugly. And I haven't really
See,
thought
most
through
of the times it seems to know when it's looking for something past its cutoff and invokes a tool to go get it.
it. Oh, and it,
Most of the time.
yeah, but in the very first review, it fell over it. The next two or three, it didn't, and then it fell over it again. So it's very inconsistent. But I am truly beginning to believe that with these tools, Google and Meta and all these other companies they're laying off all these engineers, and they're saying it's for AI reasons. And honestly, they were probably too staffed up, and they can make the revenue look way better by limiting expenditures and continuing to increase profits. And I do think AI is playing into some of it, but somebody was telling me the other day, we think we may have a competitor because this is brand new freaking stuff. Like I know we have competitors, but we think we have found like somebody who's definitely a competitor. And I said, how many engineers do they have? They were like, I don't know, a couple dozen. And
Okay.
the words out of my mouth were, we have four. They'll never catch us. And I was like, oh God, I think it's true. Because think about it, a team of four, communication's instantaneous, it's easy. You can hand things off, right? An individual engineer can hold context on pretty much everything because they can look at the guy next to him and be like, hey, what are we doing on this one? And I was like, holy smokes, can we build this whole thing with four people? Because I think we can. That includes
Yeah.
me.
Yeah. But I think that, again, that's where the fun part is going to be, right? Because it's going
Yeah.
to rely on finding the right technical structures and architecture and ways of doing work
Yes.
that line up with doing fast work.
Yes.
And
And
you're unencumbered. In some ways, you're unencumbered because you don't have to deal with the higher number of engineers, but it becomes more reliant on making good technical decision making and practicing the craft of software engineering correctly or whatever that agile in an agile way with a small a.
yes, we're adopting, I don't have any other word to call it. We're adopting a standard set of artifacts, and it's going to be part of every PR. It's going to be part of every, like the repository itself. So the idea is that when you sit down with a feature, you're going to have an artifacts folder, and the artifacts folder has a few things in it. The first one is the PRD. We're going to have a PRD for every branch, for every feature, unless it's like something trivial, right? If you're sitting down to do work, like it's easy enough to spin up a PRD at this point.
You give the AI a bunch of bullets and say, this is what I'm going to
This is
do,
what I'm
flesh
going
it
to
out. It
do.
fleshes
Yeah,
it out. It's
yeah,
overly eager. You
yeah.
go clean up a bunch of stuff you don't
Okay,
need, and now you got like
yeah.
pretty good
Now,
context as to why and how.
so now we've got the PRD in the artifacts directory. We're also going to keep a findings artifact. What I found when I was doing all the work rebuilding the pipeline was that I had to keep a running like list of things that I was figuring out as I was, it's just a bunch of notes basically. But it became really useful to point the robot back to a previous note and be like, hey, I'm pretty sure I made a note of this whenever. And it could go
We go
back
from
and
here.
say, oh, yeah, you did. And then a summary of where we are. Hey, the session's over for the day. I'm not going to be able to push her, whatever. Go ahead and summarize what we've done this far. And now we could actually, we can report status off of the artifacts. I don't know what we're going to do during the merge. I haven't gotten that far ahead.
You can have artifacts with each has a different folder.
Yeah, but that, I
So
mean,
it's like this feature, that feature. I've been doing this for a while where you
yeah.
have like exactly all that. There's a general folder that has the overall what the product does and the architecture and technical constraints and how to run tests and other things you wanted to know that it's going to ignore anyway, and you have to kind of point it back to it all the time. Sure. But then you have one folder per feature, and you can, once it's
Yeah.
done and you don't need a lot of the context, you can move some of that context back and fold it into the main product context.
We're
That
using,
sort of thing.
we're going to use MD, so markdown files. So one of the things I was thinking of is, can we move these things to like Obsidian? Basically, during the set of GitHub action, if the PR is successful, if we merge it, that we
You
then
want any source control though?
you can put source control on Obsidian. You can
Okay.
literally back end you can back end Obsidian with a GitHub repository. And it's, oh, I know how to work with GitHub. So there's an interesting, here's the thing though, like what we're finding, and I know you agree with me, is that all of
Oh,
the software engineering fundamentals are still there. You still have to have them. You don't get away from how to build good software.
have you been reading my LinkedIn?
Actually, I haven't. But like
That's what I go on about all the time.
how we're reassembling everything is new ground. Because it's the capabilities change everything. I mean, here's another thing, right? I'm going to set up a Docker image with a Perplexity browser in it. And before we allow anything to be merged to main, I'm going to let the Perplexity browser, the agent in the browser, click everything for me. I'm going to tell it what I want it to do, and it'll go do it because it can. Now all of a sudden, there's like robotic QA that always runs before, and it's going to look at the PRD and say, this is what it should be doing. Is it actually doing it? Here's some inputs and outputs I want you to check for. But it's agentic, just like everything else. It runs on, I don't know if it runs on Claude or something else. But Reed Hastings is like every engineer is going to end up managing a bunch of agents. And it's, oh, yeah, I think he's right. I mean, what do you like? Any of this sounds so far out in left field that you think I'm crazy?
No, I don't think so. I think there's still kind of a lot of
Yeah.
other things may end up being important that we hadn't foreseen now, but I think the
Yeah.
general direction is relatively clear at this point.
Yeah. We have an automatic deploy when we merge domain, and it still terrifies me. I'm not gonna lie.
It deploys to staging, presumably,
No, not right at the moment.
to prod.
It's gonna.
I mean, so it's a
Probably
little
gonna
YOLO without the right protections, but
No, honestly, the only major issue right now, and yes, we're gonna want to have it deploy somewhere other than directly to prod. Ironically, that particular thing is the result of folks that would have two branches where they would have one branch for development and only once it was like approved, and then they would merge that branch into main, and then main would always deploy. So that's going to change. It's wild, dude. I really think that you can move faster. I've always thought you can move faster with a small group of engineers, but now
yeah, till you
like,
hit the limits of what a small group of engineers can do, and that now has been enhanced, so gives you
okay,
some runway.
there is one thing though that you can't do with a small group of
Tiny little
engineers.
wafer thin mint,
Wafer
Mr.
thin.
Creosote.
If you have a small group of engineers and now you have to start responding to incidents, it is gonna get ugly. real fast.
Yeah, but you're not going to have incidents because you wrote the code so nicely, and the monitoring and observability and self-healing is there. So who needs a
Yeah.
pager?
I mean, yeah, I know that is a lovely vision. You and I both know it's a lie. But I mean,
Or I don't know.
it's not crazy to think because GitHub Copilot will already fix bugs for you. Google has something that'll do the same thing. So it's okay. Could we get agents to respond to incidents? I don't know that I'd be super comfortable with that being unsupervised, but I don't know.
I think the typical problem that we have is the incidents that exists, we generally create them through deploys. So in that sense, you're kind of generally around, if you had good observability, you're kind of generally around to observe the train wreck. And when you observe it way later, it's because you had poor observability. Again, very broadly generalizing here, but if you can prevent your own goals by breaking the system because you have good checks and you tend not to break the system, it's unlikely that you have these happening wildly. Like, for example, with Savvy Aviation, a long-standing client of mine, we don't really have incidents. Maybe over the last 15 years we've been running, we've been down for a few hours in total. It's been like extremely stable. But it has an architecture that was kind of engineered to run that way because it's run by a few people, and one of them is me, and I don't like waking up in the middle of the night.
Amen, brother.
So it don't break
Okay, but all right. So,
in many ways.
I've worked with you on Savvy. I think that you heard me both cuss and praise the number of pre-commit checks, the number of post-commits. But what is that really? And I know I've been in the code and I've looked at it, but like for everybody else, talk about what that architecture looks like.
Well, it's got
And
a dumbass architecture that is simple and easy for anyone to understand. It's resilient. It runs off a AWS RDS database, which you rely on. A few times
yeah,
we've had outages because a US East 1 was down. It's like,
sure.
hey, you and
You
me and
can't do
everyone else
anything. Yeah.
on the planet is down now. The only times that we have broken it is by pushing a bad release, and those times you just press the revert button, and 5 minutes later you're back to where you were a minute ago, and then you can take your time to figure it out. There's a couple of times where, um, more in the 5 to 10 years ago, where some of these systems weren't as fast, where you press the button, push the bad release, and it wasn't feasible to revert, and then it took a bit of futzing around manually for an hour till you fix it. But those are few and far apart and long behind us. So there are things to be said about good checks and architectures and using boring tools.
Yeah. And actually I swear one thing I've taken away from you as much as I hated some of the work to make it all reliable is man, the boring checks make everything better. Like the boring checks really. I told someone the other day, I said, they were like, I think I'm going to put AI in my project. And I was like, this was somebody talking about maybe trying to start a company. And I said, based on what you told me, everything runs in a spreadsheet. He was like, yeah. I was like, you don't need AI. You need to turn your spreadsheet into software. That's all you need to do. And so what's interesting is that as much as I hate to say it, you're right. And the dumb small checks always make a huge difference. Hey,
It's a collection of dumb checks sort of put together
right.
that build up your capabilities. Because if you have to test end to end, good luck with that. But if you can test like from A to B separately, from B to C, from C to D, then you have a pretty good idea that when you string them all together, it's gonna work.
Yeah. So if you're building a system the way that I'm trying to build it right now, very simple database API layer, there is like this LLM core in the middle that's pretty complex. How do you see, I mean, how would you go about testing some of this, right? You can isolate everything and say, I get this input in, I get this input out. But I can't think of how to like reliably test the inputs and outputs to the LLM.
You, so if you're testing the LLM, there's two kinds of tests you can do, right?
Mhm.
One test is if I call the LLM with these input arguments, does it give me some output? Right? Am I calling this correctly, or am I saying you're saying too many tokens, or like you didn't put this parameter in, right, and blows up?
Okay. Yeah.
Now, you can do a contract test to make sure your system is calling it in the right way. So if you can keep up with any time like an API changes, you're catching this kind of error. If you call in an LLM to say, if I give you this input, you give me this output, then you can't really do that because it's not a deterministic thing, especially if you're
Right.
running with any kind of temperature that is higher than 0. Um,
Yeah.
so,
Yes,
so
indeed.
that's not going to work. Now, what you could do on top of that is you could put another LLM. You look at the outputs of the first LLM and say, does this do
Is this
these
good enough?
things?
Yeah. Yeah.
Now, again, you can have the delusion of the delusion playing here, but then you can take this test and run it 100 times and say, okay, I ran this 100 times. How many times was it successful? How many times did it fail? If you can detect it fails, you could conceivably build this in your production system and say, okay, repeat this enough until you have it's a checker on the output they can build in there. So it begins to look a little bit more probabilistic, but
Okay.
again, depends what you're building, but you're kind of stuck in this kind of thing. You can build more rigid systems in a way so you can regex your way into checking what the output is going to be. No, I mean, uh, depends,
I
right?
had
Because
Quad give up on a regex one time, okay? Even the AI
You're
knew
writing the
it.
regex. So you're writing the regex saying, I'm going to give it like this input, and there's going to be output that varies, but I expect it to have,
Conform to this. Yeah.
it should have the word Celsius or Fahrenheit or Kelvin in there, but it has to have one of these 3 words in there. And they're in there, then we got a problem.
Okay.
So you could do those kind of tricks, but yeah, I think those are some of the things that we know right now of how to do this, and those are going to evolve over time, and we're going to have a lot of fun with it.
Yeah. The one thing I keep coming back to is that this little system we're building, the more things we add to it, and we're adding, like right now, we've got multiple different data types. So you've got like RAG, you've got memory, you've got user data, but we keep adding things. And the more things we add, the more emergent behavior we can harness. And it gets a lot harder to make sure that it's doing what we want. So
That's where you're going to also do the chopping up, right?
yeah,
So you have the LLM part, you can kind of test this part, but then you have more stuff outside it, and you can test those separately. And if the LLM does this thing, the rest
yeah.
of it kind of works.
By the way, I would like to touch on coding agents as we wrap this up. I will not be using coding agents for a while. So I tried
As in
again.
indie coding agents,
I had an independent coding agent that was accessing the user data. It had a read-only account. I was careful. God, I just couldn't figure it out. And eventually, I was talking with Chris, and he goes, "Why don't we just?" He basically fed me "Why are you trying to use AI when you just need a spreadsheet?" And I was like, "Yeah, you're
yeah, I can just change this for loop myself. Like this is,
Yes. So coding agents, beautiful idea. Still not, don't think I'm going to rely on them anytime in the near
yeah. I think
future.
this, my weekend project is to continue to play a little bit with my own writer of code and evaluator of code and see if I
How's it
can build
going?
a Thanos evaluator. It is going. It is still sitting on my laptop because I haven't worked on it since I go back from Greece, which was a solid 3 weeks ago. For step one, pull code on my desktop, and then we'll go from there.
All right. All right. I am excited to hear about this. Can we hear about this next week?
Sure.
All right.
Though I have a guest lined up for next week.
Oh, do we?
Yeah, we do.
Ooh,
I
can
mean,
we?
we can.
I mean, sure. I need to go edit episodes, get those out.
There's that.
Our release, I would like to point out that the last few weeks have been wild for both of us. So, ladies and gentlemen, we're very sorry that I am not editing. All right. Anything else, my good friend?
I think we covered enough.
All right. Humans of Earth, thank you for coming along on Will AI Snapdad. My name is Michael Rollins, and I'm joined as always by my co host, Thanos. He of the Snapdom. And we wish you a lovely night.